Welcome to Upticks with Jake Falcon, founder and CEO of Falcon Wealth Advisors. In this podcast, we help high net worth individuals overcome financial complexities. We do this by enhancing financial literacy and discussing topics in a language free from industry jargon. Join us as we help explain exactly what having a solid financial plan means, as Jake draws from years of experience in helping hundreds of individuals get financially organized and focused on their goals. We hope you find Upticks educational, entertaining, and shareable. Now, on to the show.
Welcome back to the show with Jake and Corey. This is episode 264. Corey, I'm having fun with our topics.
I am too.
And I know we've got a lot to discuss today, but before we dive in, I want to share this story. It's not really patting myself on the back.
Please. Please do.
I just recently walked 100 holes of golf in one day. How about that?
And you played them. You didn't just walk them, right? You walked them and played them.
Right. Good point. I played 100 holes of golf. Thank you. Stand corrected. I played 100 holes of golf in one day. And it rained.
Most of the day.
Yeah. Special shout out to Joe Roast on our team who caddied for me. He had a push cart. There were 5 other guys that did it. We did 2 threesomes. And we tee off at about 7 in the morning and we finished about 7:30, 7:45 at night. We played 4 different courses. So, it's almost like we needed a pit crew in between courses, because it wasn't really the golf that was slow. It was, changing shoes and socks, and they had push carts, breaking down the push carts, putting the push carts back together. But it was all for charity, youth on course. Really cool thing. Lets junior golfers play for $5. I had 8 birdies. I had a triple bogey. I think I had 5-ish double bogeys and a lot of pars and bogeys, but it was cool. I'm sore.
I bet. No, I think it's really cool. I'm glad that you got to do that. And I'm glad the group did that. And it sounds like there was a decent amount of money that was ultimately raised for the charitable organization too, which is great.
Yeah, it was good. It's a national thing. So I think people were doing it all over the country on the same day, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So that's why we did it that day specifically. But yeah, it was really cool. Now I'm curious, Corey, do you think you could ever play 100 games of tennis in one day?
100 games?
Well, like game as in I don't know what it's called. Is it a match or set? I don't know is it game?
Yeah. So if you're watching tennis, if you watch the US Open, for example, they're playing.
I didn't watch it because ESPN was blocked.
Right.
Oh, I didn't watch the US Open.
They're playing up to 5 sets. Each set goes to 6, and then each set is composed of multiple games. So I think that games would be the equivalent here, but it would be a lot. I think I could, but it would be a lot. I think that the tennis
hold on. How many games are in a set? How many games are in a match?
That depends, actually. So the maximum amount of games that would be in a set would presumably be 13.
Forget it. Tennis is too confusing. Never mind. Maybe you could play tennis for 12 hours.
Yeah, that would be probably the best equivalent, and that would be very difficult to do.
All right. Let's get into our show today. So
let's do it.
Topic number 1 here. I want to know, and probably you already know this, Corey, but I want to talk about what the 50-30-20 rule is. Have you heard of this one, Corey?
I have.
So this article in the Wall Street Journal. I thought it was good. And again, this show is not designed to be financial advice that you take home and implement. It's really designed to enhance your financial literacy. So if this is an exercise you want to go through with your team at Falcon Wealth Advisors, let us know. But the premise is, Corey, that you spend half of your after tax, so this would be your take-home paycheck, half of it towards your needs. So this would be your mortgage, your light bill, your water bill, food. 30% towards your wants. So this would be like going out to eat, tennis for you, golf for me, and 20% towards savings. So my first question for you, Corey, is do you do this?
I do.
You do the 50-30? I don't do it.
It's pretty closely aligned. I'm not intentional about doing it that way, but it's pretty closely aligned with that.
Because you and I both are owners of this business, I don't look at my income net of taxes. And so I do a little different variation. Actually, I start with how much I have to save. which is about 10% roughly of my gross. Gross, this is before taxes. And then I make sure I've got my mortgage and all the necessities allocated for. And then whatever's left, I blow on whatever we want. Because I know if I've got my savings set up, so mine's a little different actually. My savings I think of first so that my financial plan works. Then I cover my mortgage and everything else. And then we just spend what's left. But you think about it as your needs first, then your wants, then your saving?
Yeah. So no, actually, the more we're talking it through, Jake, I think that what I do is more closely aligned with what you're doing. Really the big variation, and this is good because we haven't talked about this. The big variation for me is that if I look at gross income, I am setting the tax piece aside. And then from there, I'm calculating the needs, wants, and wishes and savings.
So basically,
I'm
setting
just
the
setting the
gross
taxes
income aside.
Pardon?
You're setting the gross income aside? Is that what you said?
I'm setting the taxes aside.
Taxes aside. Got it.
Yep.
See, yeah, I don't do that. That's interesting. So we do it a little different. So the point, though, it's a good article. I think it's a great article because it gets people thinking about how they allocate their cash flow. And that's why I wanted to bring it up today, Corey, is that you should just be thinking about your cash flow. And if you can bucket it out, hey, whether you want to call it needs, wants, wishes, or, what was this one? Needs, wants, savings, however you want to do it, you got to make sure you're saving for retirement so you can be financially independent. You got to take care of the necessities. And then you should have guilt-free spending what's whatever's left over. Good.
All right. Very good. So what I've got here next, Jake, this is an article from Barron's. And the headline was that more Americans are working into their 80s. What is keeping them in the workforce? And I wanted to include this to talk about this. Retirement planning is a big part of what we do. Most of our clients, if they're not already retired, they're actively planning to retire in the next 5 to 10 years or so. So I thought this was interesting because for a few reasons. One, this article talked, Jake, about how just 5.3% of people at 80 years old or older are currently working or actively looking for work. But that demographic is expected to grow by 78% over the next decade, which is the biggest increase of any particular cohort. But the reality, and I think that if to kind of drive this point home or to conceptualize it, I think the most obvious place to look for proof of this is Washington, D.C. If we look at the White House, if we look at Congress, whomever it is, the median age in the Senate is 65 years old. But really the primary reason that people are working longer, and there's three reasons. One is financial need. That's simply if someone doesn't have enough saved and they need the income. The second is physical and cognitive health. A lot of people choose to work because it helps to keep them active. And there have been studies that have shown that cognitive decline among inactive adults occurs much more quickly than it does among active seniors. And then lastly, a sense of purpose and utility. Because there was a study that was done that showed that about a quarter of retirees in the survey done by a group that was called AgeWave reported challenges finding their life's purpose after retirement. So really the financial need, the physical and cognitive health, and the sense of purpose. But I really liked one of the quotes they included in there, as simple as it is, but someone that they interviewed said, I really enjoy what I do at work more than I would enjoy retirement.
Yeah, that's good. Do you know anyone has anyone in your family worked in their 80s?
No, not in my family. Not that I know of.
My grandpa did. I think he retired when he was 80. And I think that attributed a lot to his longevity and his health. So I'm actually a big fan. I can't believe it's only 5%. I'm glad you shared this article. I saw this article as well, and I saw that you'd already kind of loaded in the doc here, so I didn't read through it. But I have a client who I think she's in her 80s and still working. Mm-hmm. And you're right, there's a lot of benefits, so I love it though. Financial need is a good reason, obviously. Physical and cognitive health and sense of purpose and utility. If you love what you do, and I think that's why my grandpa worked long. I mean, I think he had all three, helped him with all three, but it also helped provide him with a purpose and something to get up for and to go do. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it's awesome, actually. I respect it. I respect someone that retires at 50. I also respect someone that retires at 80. So it's really about purpose and cash flow and health. It's good.
Yeah. I just want to add real quickly to that. I've also worked with some clients that they had no plans to work in retirement and they didn't work for several years, but they may have started doing something later in their life, later in retirement, and ended up finding a lot more satisfaction from it than they might have expected.
Yeah, that's good. All right, I got one here. Credit card users got bigger limits. Then, Corey, they racked up $1 trillion in debt, which is crazy. So according to the Federal Reserve Bank, America's total credit card balance hit $1 trillion for the first time last month. So I wanted to kind of point out some reasons here and kind of just give some of our audience some tips. But lenders generally increase their credit limits because they want to entice you to spend more money, right? So if you start out with a credit card with a $10,000 or $20,000 limit, and it magically you get something in the mail saying now you've got 30 or 40,000, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to hook you in to spend more so you don't pay it off every month. But ultimately, there is a benefit to the credit card holder to keep your credit score from dropping. This article by the Wall Street Journal says that financial advisors say it's best to use no more than a third of your total credit limit across all cards, which I thought was a pretty cool tip. So again, if you've got 30,000 of available credit card limits, you shouldn't spend more than 10,000 to help your credit score. So again, if you can refrain from racking up a bill where you can't pay it off every month, it's okay to see your credit limit increase. But you got to remember, these credit card companies make money off fees that they charge the businesses to swipe the card, and then fees from borrowers basically not paying off their balances in full every month.
Yeah, that's $1 trillion is a lot of money. I guess the consumers in our country are trying to be more like the government, Jake, in racking up the debt, because I know they've got it too. But I do think that it's good. And you're right, as far as the article has pointed out, and in my research and experience, has been that really, as far as that credit usage goes, I think that's a great tip when people are evaluating how their credit scores are impacted. Usage of available credit limits is a big contributor. I also think that if people, there's been more talk about this, and I've certainly experienced it some myself too. If more recently, if people have been getting prompted by the credit card company, wherever they have their cards, to update their income, credit card companies are regularly wanting you to tell them how much money you make so they can determine whether they should give you a larger or a smaller credit line. So I just simply point that out here to let people know that if they're getting prompted those questions, that's largely the reason they're doing it, is to figure out whether they should extend or shrink the size of the credit limit that they've extended to you.
Yeah, that's good, Corey. Now, if you lack discipline, the article did make a good point that you can always call in your credit card company and said, hey, you increased my limit, but I'd like you to pull that back down. You can do that. So you have that option. So you don't need to have that, dangling temptation out there to have this huge limit if you don't think that you're going to be disciplined, which is nothing wrong with that, right? So if you know that you're going to overspend, you might as well get that credit card limit pushed back down so you can't.
Yep, that's good. All right, the next one that I've got here, Jake, is from the Wall Street Journal. And the headline here was that amateurs pile into 24-hour options. Quote, it's just gambling. So that was the headline from the story. And I thought this was a fun and a little scary Wall Street Journal article about basically rookie speculators that are trying to strike it big on short-term investments in the market. There's a lot of people that have pointed out that this type of trading or this type of activity is really it's not really investing. It is much more like speculating or like gambling. And just to kind of bring this back for a moment, options trading, and there's a great chart that I would like to include here for Cam, just talks about the average daily options volume over the last 20 or 30 years. And it's really moved higher and higher, and it's almost gone parabolic the last few years. So options trading is something that a lot more people have begun to do. But these 24-hour options, as some of our clients or anybody watching the show may know, if the market opened this morning at 8:30, Jake, you or I could buy or sell options that expire today when the market closes. But the reality is, where the market closes and whatever that underlying security is, wherever it's at is going to determine whether that option is worth a bunch of money or if it's worthless. So my perspective on this, and what my takeaway from this was, if you're spending hard-earned money buying options that could be worth $0 at the end of the day, it just begs the question: do you have a saving and investing strategy elsewhere? This article very much highlighted a lot of younger people, and there were some great quotes in there. And I mean great from an entertainment perspective, Jake, not great in that this is what I would encourage anyone to do. There's a guy who talked about he won 75 grand on an options trade, and then he spent 25,000 of it playing poker in Las Vegas that day. But he thinks he's a great options trader. The point here being, I think it's fascinating that people are engaging in this type of activity, knowing that it's a long shot. And I think that it's really more indicative of like the get rich quick versus get rich slow mentality and what really works over the long term.
Right. Well, and I'm glad that I didn't scare you away from bringing back charts. I know that first one had chart also, so hopefully Luke showed that one as well. But these are the kind of charts I'm okay with, Corey, because you're not trying to predict the future, which is good. But you're right. It's crazy how much it spiked. I blame COVID. I think, even one of my relatives said that, during COVID, they just started trading stocks because they were bored. Right. So I think a lot of people, and with the, the emergence of some of these trading apps, they made it a lot easier. And I think it's called democratized trading to make it a lot easier and cheaper for anybody to do. And so as a natural springboard, of course, options will emerge and play a role in that. But I like your point that, if you're literally worried about what the market does on a daily basis, that is gambling, because we could buy a stock for a client and it goes straight down for days or weeks or months. But as long as nothing's changed fundamentally with that company, that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't like it. But when you're doing these options, and again, we like options for a certain set of clients that are qualified and in a different strategy, but we're not doing these daily expiration options. However, we have experimented with it in the past. So I think it's good for our clients to know that, look, we're not going to ignore things and just shut it down. But, I think you and I have double the reason to not like them, because not only do we recognize that it is speculating a little bit, we've actually tried it, and we found that 1 year we did great, 1 year we did bad, then we were kind of doing mediocre. And so we said, you know what, this is silly. We're not adding value to our clients' lives from an investment standpoint. Let's shut it down. But I'm glad the Wall Street Journal did an article on this, and hopefully it doesn't encourage more people to do it, because it's very risky.
Yes, it is.
All right, good. So my next article, Corey, is the secret to saving for retirement is to start before you're 20. Another article in the Wall Street Journal says, and I always say this to people, save early and save often. Some people don't know this. And actually a client asked about this the other day, so it is a perfect overlap, is that you can in fact open what's called a custodial Roth IRA as long as your child has earned income. I made a point here in my notes to don't try to skirt the system, though, because you don't want to get audited and face potential IRS penalties. And so if your kid is actively working and gets a W-2 and they're under 18, for example, or however all those labor laws work, that's kind of beyond the scope of today's show. But my point is, if your kid is working, I would highly encourage you to consider opening a Roth IRA for them, even if they can't fund it. The article mentioned that you could set up some sort of matching, or saying, hey, if you put in, I'll match 50%, almost like a 401k would, to help encourage your child to start saving. I do have a newer client who has a significant amount in her Roth IRA, and she's pretty young, Corey. And I asked her, I was like, how did you get this much money in a Roth? Most people your age don't have that much. And it was her dad. Her dad had her started really early with it, and she's continued that habit. And good for her, because she's approaching retirement, and she's going to have a lot of money in that Roth IRA, where a lot of our clients don't. So, you have any thoughts on this?
No, I think that like, as we know, ultimately time is one of the things that's on your side, especially if you're starting investing early. So it makes sense. If previously people thought it made sense to start saving before, the age of 30, if you could start saving before the age of 20, or you could save on the behalf of your children or grandchildren before the age of 20, that much better, because ultimately you have time on your side for the tax-free compounding to occur ultimately in a Roth IRA. So yeah, I think I like the idea, and I think when people have the ability to do it, it makes a ton of sense.
Right. Now, I think the question's going to be, what if my kid mows lawns, or does chores? I think ultimately you're going to want to run this by your CPA, because they're the ones that are going to need to back you up on proving that income. So again, but certainly if they're earning a wage, you definitely should look at it. And again, I would always cross-reference this with your accountant, just to make sure they feel confident in what you're doing. You don't want to get audited over this.
Right.
So
yeah, that's a great point. Okay, good. Thank you, Jake. So the next article I have here is also from the Wall Street Journal, and I'm excited to talk about this one because the headline of the article is "The problem with economic data is getting worse." And what they pointed out in this article is that first and foremost, investors are oftentimes overconfident about what they think is going to happen or about what's going to play out in the future, which we talk about all the time on the show, that people think they know what's going to happen down the road. And there's a lot of overconfidence there. But they also talk about how even wise investors are prone to buy into the narratives about the state of the economy that can ultimately turn out to be flawed. And what they highlighted specifically in this article, Jake, was the jobs numbers in the United States. The BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, basically reports the monthly jobs numbers, how many jobs have been added, et cetera. A big takeaway from this is that after those numbers are reported, they are revised after the fact. And as far as this year goes, there have been basically 250,000 fewer jobs created this year at this point than have been reported on a month-over-month basis because of backwards revision. So basically, jobs numbers that we were seeing 3 or 6 months ago may have been revised 2 or 4 months ago, that ultimately reflects the data. And the large point, and the reason I wanted to talk about this today, Jake, is that, we talked about this recently on a webinar that we did. We see the inflation numbers, we see the jobs numbers. People always have questions. What are the inputs that go into that? How do those figures change? I think the big takeaway from all of this is that understanding what those inputs look like, what those data points ultimately are, is useful, but that should not be the end all be all that someone is using to determine their investment strategy.
Yeah, that's why this whole, what does it say? There's like economists, like they always think they get it right or whatever, they know everything, but then they go to invest and the opposite happens. So I think it's important to know what's going on in the economy, but that does not necessarily translate to the stock market. I think is a very important lesson for our clients to know. And also the data changes, which you just pointed out, that like they're going to revise it and they're going to adjust it and the numbers are going to be different. And so it's good to have something, a guideline, but you got to understand if it were that simple as like, oh, it's a no-brainer. Inflation did this, unemployment did this. I'm going to buy, I want to sell. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot more nuance that goes into it. And ultimately, they're just going to revise the numbers anyway.
Right. Yeah. And lastly, one of the notes that was included in here, though, is that really investors should be aware of the uncertainty. Try to back up any position based on economic data by checking other data and surveys also. Anecdote can be helpful, but it can lead us to focus too much kind of on our own social groups. So basically, understanding the details of the data can be helpful, particularly, and I just wanted to point this out here, and these are the words from the article, not Corey's words, the silliness of owner equivalent rent and the inflation numbers. The point here being when CPI is reported, the consumer price index, the inflation data, about 1/3 of the services are ultimately home owner's equivalent rent, which is basically, Jake, you and me as homeowners, if we filled out this survey, we could include what we think someone would be willing to pay for monthly rent if we were to rent our home out to someone else, which is a very arbitrary number. I could just say, here's what I think it is. But ultimately, that data contributes to the housing number that is in CPI.
Doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. It is silly. I don't understand. To this day, I don't understand why that is the way that housing is factored into that calculation.
Yeah, good one. I'm glad you brought attention to it. All right, so the title of our show, Corey, couples embrace the least romantic date ever, the money date. Have you ever been on a money date with Cassie?
Sort of.
You have? Okay, I want to hear about it here in a moment, but let me explain what this is. So basically, this is turning financial planning into a date, and that may sound like a mismatch, but science backs up the premise. It's a form of temptation building, Corey. So it's saying basically pairing a less exciting task with a more exciting reward. Research suggests that actually help people change their habits. So this is what the professor Scott Ricks said at the University of Michigan. So he says to pair the want with the should in order to entice you to do the should. Get each other money date presents. Open the nice bottle of wine. Say, this is the night we order in from the best restaurant in town. It says start small on your money dates. Maybe you go over the credit, which I don't think this sounds fun. Going over the credit card statement over dinner. Not to judge
Yeah.
each other, but just to see if anything weird. Maybe you got hacked. If you have student loan payments, maybe go over those. Travel budgets would be fun. And here's my last point. I want to hear about you and Cassie's money date. But having that monthly touch point allows you to feel okay. If I have a concern, it's not going to go on indefinitely. I'll have a chance to talk to them. I don't have to confront them. So that was another person that was quoted in this article. So Corey, tell me about your experience with money dating.
Yeah, so Cassie and I have done this at home. And we have not gone out to a restaurant to talk about our finances. We have done this at home, but whether it's over a bottle of wine, I think we've actually done this like literally over breakfast at home on a weekend, like on a Saturday or a Sunday. And usually what we've talked about is thinking about the next, 90 days to half a year to the next 12 months. Really, what are our big ticket, not only expenses, but just what are our financial priorities? And then sort of mapping out a timeline for the way that we see ourselves both saving and spending those dollars. But what we have found to be really useful in that is that, oftentimes there's something that we're thinking about doing that when we really talk it through, we realize, this just isn't that important to us. And it's certainly not something that we need to spend money on. So it helps us to find some alignment. But I think the last quote that you read that was included in that article is good, that by doing something like this, it just sort of, it establishes the venue, for the lack of a better term, of when you can have these conversations. So it doesn't have to be a constant point of stress or strain in a relationship.
Yeah, I think that is good too. I think Rachel and I, we did this a little bit. Again, we didn't go out to dinner, but at home, I think it was like a weekend morning when I was using that e-money budgeting tool. I had some questions over some purchases that she helped me classify. So again, it wasn't confrontational at all. And it was beneficial for us to kind of both see where our money was going. So I thought that was kind of cool. But I like having, I don't know if monthly for us would work, maybe quarterly, but I think it'd be cool to have a quarterly, like, hey, let's have a family meeting once a quarter to talk about our goals, our wishes, our dreams, whatever, our budget, just so that, anything's on the table then and we could talk about it. I like that.
Yes,
So,
I think it's great.
money date. I never heard of that one.
The money date.
It's a good one.
All right.
Corey, bring us home here. I know you've got one more topic.
Last one I've got here. This is from CNBC. Social Security's trust funds are running dry. Here's 4 things to know. This is a popular article. Some variation of this article has been written as long as I can remember. And I have talked to clients and answered questions about this for about as long as I can remember. But the 4 things that CNBC pointed out that people should know is that 1, Social Security is America's pension safety net. And 67 million Americans get a Social Security check each month. Most, if not all, are retirees, disabled workers, surviving spouses. So there's 67 million people in the country that are collecting benefits, and really the demographics I just highlighted are the people that are collecting from that. Also, though, demographics are stressing the program's finances. People collecting money from Social Security are living longer, which means the program pays recipients over a longer period of time. There are about 10,000 baby boomers that are retiring every day. We've talked about that. It's a big kind of mind-blowing number, but 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. And the amount of money that's going into Social Security is not covering all of the expenses that are there. The third point that they made is that Social Security won't go away, but there may be cuts, which is basically saying it's not as if Social Security goes broke. It's a matter of how much money can Social Security pay out. So what they're projecting is that if nothing changed in roughly a decade, depending on what that timeline looks like, everybody who receives benefits from Social Security would have to take a haircut of about 25% of the income they're collecting. And then lastly, they pointed out there will be losers. And I think this is good to talk about, Jake. They highlighted that Congress will almost surely tweak Social Security to fix the solvency problem. The potential fixes to this issue are, 1, it may include reducing benefits, delaying the full retirement age, raising taxes on benefits, increasing the financial penalties for claiming Social Security before full retirement age, or some combination of these factors. The reality is that I think, younger, my opinion, Jake, is that, younger, it's going to look a lot different probably for you and me than it will for our clients. But I don't think that ultimately 67 million Americans getting a haircut in terms of their monthly income from Social Security seems very plausible or very likely. And I expect that ultimately a big way to solve at least part of the problem is to increase how much money goes into the trust fund.
Yeah. And, I've probably said this before on this show, but I just believe that Social Security is one of the world's biggest Ponzi schemes. I mean, it's unbelievable how private citizens, if they were running something like this, Corey, they would be in jail. But for some reason, the U.S. government has gotten away with mismanaging our money, frankly. And so, and the reason I call it a Ponzi scheme is because current beneficiaries of Social Security are getting paid with people that are actively working. And so that basically is the definition of a Ponzi scheme, is that old money is getting paid with new money. And so you're right, it is a problem. I think the government has mismanaged the funds. And of course, they're not asking for my opinion, but the takeaway for our clients is there are things they can do to solve for the issue, whether that's, again, a combination of reducing benefits, taxing more dollars, bigger penalties for drawing early, whatever it is. I'm sure at some point something will be done. It won't be very popular because you're going to upset some sector of the population more than likely. You're right. I think our clients in their 50s or older probably won't be affected. I could be wrong, but I don't see that happening. I see people in their 40s, 30s, 20s being more negatively impacted. But stay tuned and we will adjust and pivot and move the plan from here. But I'm not a fan of Social Security at all. I know we've already all paid into it, so it's like this thing you can't just stop. But I wish they could also invest the money. That would probably solve it also. But they don't bring that up. I guess right now they could buy treasury bills with that money coming in and probably help out big time. But anyways.
Yeah. Well, I remember it wasn't that long ago that it was being floated like if the Social Security Trust Fund bought stocks, because they don't. Particularly in a much lower interest rate environment that we've lived through. They're just all of that.
Do they buy treasury bills?
I think so. I'm pretty confident that treasuries are largely the investments that they own there. But I think the real issue, of course, is that more people are retiring and people live for longer. So if somebody retires and collects Social Security benefits for 30 years or 40 years, and there's more people that are doing just that, the reality is that when the program was established, it was not intended for people to collect income from 30 years from it.
Right. Yeah. So forgive me on that if they do buy T-bills, but you're right. They could buy diversified stocks like pensions do.
Just like pensions do, exactly. Because this is America's pension, right? If we think about it that way, it's mandatory that you participate. You have to make contributions. You will collect income from it. But yes, making sure the money's managed appropriately. The reality is, it seems very likely to me that people that are working and earning income will pay more money into Social Security. So the people that are relying upon it for their income won't have to take a big haircut. But I suppose, Jake, to your point, that means just make the Ponzi bigger to what you're saying. I mean, what we're talking about here is that if you're paying more money in, but I also understand the perspective of people that have paid into Social Security for 30 or 40 years. It's like, well, I paid into it. Right. I need to collect the benefits from it. And I don't disagree with that. But that also in and of itself is just what creates the real issue here. Or the fact that nobody's really come up with too many solutions to this point, and they may not come up with a solution until it's time to.
Good point, but they're gonna have to do something. So
yep,
I'm glad you included that, and that's something again we talk about all the time. Perfect. Do you have any? Wrapping it up real quick. I'm reading recommendations. I'm reading a new book called The Gambler about Billy Walters. The guy seems a little seedy. It's a really quick and easy read. Have you heard of this guy?
I don't think so.
Man, he's a big time gambler. I guess, I don't know. I'm not far enough into the book to kind of comment on it too much, but it's a newer book that just came out and I really enjoyed it. But it just I'm not really a big gambler, and it's sad how much this guy just was all in it basically most all of his life so far, according to the book. So be careful with those vices because it can be a slippery slope. You got any quick recommendations? I actually have a book that I can't recommend yet, Jake, because I haven't read it. But the book that I just ordered, it's called Dead Wake, that I'm going to begin reading here very soon. So I will report back on whether or not. I haven't read The Gambler. I just started it.
Okay. I haven't even cracked it yet.
Okay, fair enough. All right, cool. Well, thank you again for joining me, Corey, and thank you all for tuning in. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe to our content. Again, ultimately, we are producing Upticks to enhance financial literacy. And ultimately, it's about our clients' financial plans and what's important to them. So thank you again for tuning in, and we hope you have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Upticks. Click the subscribe button to be notified when new episodes become available. Also, be sure to visit our website, falconwealthadvisors.com, and click the Contact Us button if you'd like to meet with Jake and his team.